As technologists, we owe it to humanity. And I think we owe humanity a few things. The first thing is we owe humanity the humility to say that as technologists, we are very devolved. Like if you look at nature and the billions of years of evolution that it's been through versus the minuscule amount of years that technology as we know it today has been through.
Welcome everyone to WorkPod. Today we have with us an interesting guest. We have CEO and founder of Wonder, Claire Haider. So Claire, welcome to the show.
Vishal, it's so good to be here with you and the WorkPod community today. Thank you for having me.
So let's walk about let's talk about your journey. Let's talk about what brought you to this world of future of work.
So, Vishal, I'm going to go right back to when I was 18 years old. I was starting my college journey in South Africa. I was born and raised in South Africa. And I basically wanted to work as much as possible while I was doing my undergraduate to just get as much experience as I could. And the one morning, I was sitting in a lot of traffic in South Africa. And to give you an idea, the traffic is so heavy in South Africa between two of the major cities that people have to wake up at like 4 a.m. in the morning to get onto the highway at 5 a.m. to be done and ready at work at 8 a.m. So they're sitting in like 3 hours of traffic. And we standing still, the traffic is not moving. I look in my rearview mirror, I see a woman eating a bowl of cereal. I look to my right, a man is busy shaving, and I look to the left, and a woman is applying mascara. And I'm like, is this my life? I'm 18 years old, and is this what adulting is about? And I seriously, like, the sun is busy coming up in the sky, and I'm like, no, it can't be. And I think I made a commitment to myself in the car that morning that I was going to dedicate the rest of my life to being a significant part of the group of people who are fascinated by work, interested in work, and who want to genuinely change it. And so I've made it my life mission to just be really curious about work and to be part of the people who are making it better for the world as a whole.
So fascinating. So your company, what do you guys
Yeah.
do? If you can briefly talk about that.
So I'll explain it through the problems of our customers and how we solve it for them. Customers come to us when they can't quite pinpoint when something is not working right. They know that they're seeing a lot of signs of burnout in their employees. They're seeing a lot of signs of overload in terms of work and people struggling to manage with it. And they essentially come to us and say, we need to transform how we work as an organization. Can you partner with us? So we describe ourselves as a digital transformation partner for companies when it comes to work. But the key differentiator is we're not just a digital transformation services organization. We are very much a data-driven organization. So we have a product called Pattyrn. And Pattyrn is a data platform that essentially extracts information out of all of the systems that people work in. And we give people a visual of their digital assembly line. So we show them how work is flowing through their organization and where and how different people and different tasks and everything are clustered together.
Interesting. And talk to me about your entrepreneurial journey. What does it really mean for you to start this company, and what are some of the initial challenges you talk about?
Yeah. So, Vishal, this is startup number 4 for me. I had a very interesting journey. The US State Department actually ran a business plan competition where they were working with South African female entrepreneurs. And they brought us across here for 2 years. It was like a 2-year mentorship program. So we had a very in-depth, immersive, like 6-week program, yeah. And then it carried on for 2 years. And that's essentially what started my entrepreneurial journey. So that was where I built my first company. Fast forward, I spent about a decade of my life in Europe and then founded this company today. And the reason why I took about a decade to actually form this company, given that I'd made that commitment to myself on that highway when I was 18, was that I was looking for a very specific turning point in the market. So, and I mean, you are immersed in this world of data and cloud and how technology has changed. If you go back to like 2007, 2008, you'll remember that the cloud was something at that point that engineers understood very well and could conceptualize it. But the average layman on the street and in an office was like, what's the cloud? It was like people were really grappling with it. And I, at that point in time, realized that the cloud was going to completely disrupt how people work, because we were moving from a place where we were using an inbox and possibly a spreadsheet and maybe a Word document. That was our work, to all of these disparate systems. And I said to myself, the day that enterprise organizations, so 10,000 plus organizations, take cloud technology seriously, and that migration from on-prem to cloud starts in earnest, that's when this is going to become a problem. And so essentially I waited until like 2012, 2013, started researching these problems and how work was fragmenting and impacting humans at work. And then in late 2015, early 2016, we founded this company. So,
What has been some of your observations that you have seen, that how is industry basically collaborating with you? Like, how has been your journey?
so this is a big, broad topic, and Vishal, we can go in so many directions. But what I'll do is I'd like to almost share a timeline of trends that I've seen play out over the last few years. Is the first trend is very much that people were subconsciously, it wasn't something that they were doing at a conscious level, dependent on physical workspaces to create a lot of their culture. Okay. So if you think about the painstaking effort that an interior architect and interior designers and construction firms take in terms of planning a physical office space, they're very deliberate about where the kitchen is in relation to the restroom, where meeting rooms are in terms of how light flows into them, all of those type of factors. And we go into these workspaces and we don't realize how they actually impact our collective behavior as a group of humans, and we don't take into account how they impact how we actually get work done. And if you look at like how over the past 2 years we've been shoved into this very real new reality of virtual work, where the spaces that we're working in haven't actually been architected for optimal work. They're just the tools that happen to be there and that we now use to collaborate. This is where companies are going through this major change, is they're having to completely re-architect their culture, because the building no longer dictates that culture. The building no longer gets people to move and work in a certain way without us even thinking about it. And that's why you're seeing like huge things like Zoom fatigue, Teams fatigue, because these spaces haven't been architected for mass use over prolonged periods of time the way buildings have. And if you think about how architecture has evolved and perfected the art of work, we've got a long way to go in the architecture and design of digital work tools. So that's the first trend that I'd like to call out. The second trend that I'd like to call out is what I call chaos theory. It's something that I've actually dedicated a lot of time to reading about and wrapping my head around and, collaborating with researchers around, is that if you look at the scientific concept of chaos, okay, it's something that we don't like. We hear the word chaos and we push back against it. We don't want to engage with it. We want to organize it. We want to structure it. We want to put it in a box. But the reality is that if you actually look at the scientific theory of what is chaos, it's a highly structured, highly organized network. And it just has millions and millions of nodes, and each one of those nodes are all connected, and they're all undergoing these micro changes. And so chaos feels chaotic, but it actually isn't chaotic at all in terms of how we innately understand and feel chaos. And that is what you see companies and specifically leaders as a whole are grappling with right now is how do we re-architect our workplaces to actually get comfortable in chaos because we're an interconnected world. We're each worker, each employee is one of these nodes in this huge fabric of interconnected, moving, changing parts. And it's a lot. It's a lot to handle. It's a mental overload that humans have never had to deal with before. And so I'd say those are two of the I'm talking macro trends here. You know what I mean? We can go into like a lot of micro trends and I'm very happy for the conversation to go there. But I think those are the two major macro trends right now that are really shaping what's happening in the world of work today.
I think so. But thank you so much on sharing that, shedding light on that. I think one thing that I was really excited about having a conversation with you, um, you are assisting other organizations understand the future of work, understanding this newfound reality. And trend plays a crucial role, and I love to sort of venture into the
Yeah.
trend side of the world. Um, Before that, I really want to have you understand your perspective on what does the future of work really means to you. Like when we keep hearing the word a lot. I think the fun part was 3 years back we used to hear about future of work, and it was totally different thing. I think the pandemic happened, and what actually we want to. And this is my personal journey. What I was hearing a lot about what future of work should be is pretty much like now the antithesis, like totally the negative of what we are seeing now, because we have seen us indulge into this dystopian IT all
Yeah.
around us phenomena. So from your vantage point and your personal and your organizational vantage point, what does really a future of work mean?
Yeah, and Vishal, I want to completely concur with what you've just said there. Back in 2016, I was speaking about the chaos that we're living through now. So we can't call that the future of work anymore. This is like our present reality. You know what I mean? So we've got to, I completely agree with you. We've got to start talking about a new future. I, I'd like to answer the question in two ways for you. I'd like to talk about a future that I would like to see and that I would like to be part of constructing and building. And then I think I'd like to talk about the realistic future that we're going to see play out if people don't take this seriously. So, the future that I would really like to see is a future where we're not trying to go back to this very hard line between this is my personal life and this is my work life, but where everything truly is blended. And the way I see that, like, very practically playing out is in two areas. I see work moving into a truly, truly SWAT team type structure, okay, where work is no longer going to be structured around roles and specific tasks that are related to that role that are done by the same person over and over again. I see organizations moving into structures where it truly is going to become about real problems that need to be solved for customers in very specific timeframes. And the way people and employees are going to be put onto those problems is going to be in a SWAT team style. So it's like, what is the problem? What are the set of skills that we need to address this problem? And how do we go and very quickly find those set of skills, put them onto the problem, get them to solve it, and then that team disbands? So work is going to become shorter, mission orientated in the way it happens. And people will be working for multiple organizations, solving multiple types of problems rather than be employed with one employer in one type of job. So we're talking about a very multi-careered future. The second thing that I see happening, coming more directly to speaking more directly to that very blended life, practical ways that I can see that playing out is, for example, I don't think Ubers or Lyfts or, Aldos or any of these transportation type of companies will remain just transportation companies. I think those are going to become offices on wheels. I think, we're going to see a very big shift in the transportation environment because of electricity and electric vehicles. and the versatility of those vehicles to become different types of spaces and not just be vehicles, So, I think that is where we're going to see a very, very big shift, which is going to enable that blend, because right now the infrastructure isn't there in the broader society to enable that complete and total intermeshing of work and life happening at the same time. But I think as electric vehicles and transportation completely evolve, that we are going to see that shift happening.
Interesting. So, back, I think back in, I think we're talking about 2016. What a fun time it was.
Yeah.
I remember, I was talking to, I was addressing a graduating class, and I was talking about the future and how they are venturing into what they should keep in mind. And at that point, I jokingly said, "Hey, future of work is not about the future or the work." Eh, in a very interesting way, right? So it is about actually the people. It's actually about you guys, because it's about understanding humans, understanding, because now we have done enough for the technology where it's almost like a juicer, right? So we have know
Yes.
how to extract the last piece of bit from a human and leave it as a pulp, right? So but now we have done that. Now the next level is, can we beautify, can we make us useful in a way that it's not like a juicer phenomena of work, where actually we actually extract a meaningful life and the work out of these individuals. And then the pandemic thing happened, and obviously the juicer is back in the business. But now, I think, I want to know your perspective on, when we were dealing with HRs, when we were dealing with organizations who are struggling or grappling to get their
Mm.
hands around this new and emerging realities, which are always emerging and new. What are some of the struggles that you are seeing? Like, what are some of the things that you have seen, organizations that reach out to you share, that you say,
Mm.
okay, those are some easy fix.
Mm. I'm going to answer your question in three layers, because I think it would be remiss to not answer it in all of these three layers. So the first layer is at the strategic leadership level inside organizations. If you think about, and I'm going to use technology as an example here, okay? When technology became a thing, like way back in the early 1990s, programs were just written and the UI UX experience of the user engaging with that technology wasn't considered at all. .com bubble happens and people are like, okay, we've got to completely revise this and we've got to think about how we retain people inside products and how we actually make products sticky. And so you see this whole evolution of UX and UI design coming in, and people realizing that that's how you create an experience for a user, and that's when you create stickiness inside a product. Human resources is going through that exact change right now. We've, up until now, people have just been thought of as things, that objects that are recruited and brought into a company. They're paid, and because they're paid, they therefore have to produce. That has been the general, mentality around work. What's now happening is companies are very quickly coming to the same realization that technology did back in the early 1990s. It's about creating employee experiences. Okay. And as thoughtfully as what products are designed today, HR and particularly strategic HR, your CHROs, your chief people officers are actually having to develop that skill set, that design skill set around how do I create and craft an employee experience that an employee who has multiple options decides to come because of the employee experience that's created. The second layer that I want to answer your question from is from what I term the process and the system lens. So it's the actual the insides of the operations of a company. We really, and this is something that I mentioned earlier in our conversation, is you can't just expect people to function in Zoom for 8 hours a day, 365 days a year. It's going to backfire. People are going to burn out. And so there's this and I would say that this is perhaps one of the most challenging things that companies are grappling with right now is how do we take the existing technology in its very nascent format and actually make it truly usable by our employees, because it's not optimal. So how do we live in this like V1 state and still, like layer our good employee experience into that? And then alongside that, which plays into your world and your expertise, Vishal, is the reality that we are working alongside bots today. Um, and I don't think HR people have fully sat down and accepted that. Like, you will be recruiting bots in your future. You will be going out and finding bot companions for your employees. Are you building your recruitment mechanism to do that? Are you designing job specs in a way that enables you to do that? Because I think in the future, if you think about a Gen Z person, they're going to walk into a job and say, okay, you've given me this job spec. These are the problems you want me to solve. But which pieces are my human pieces and which pieces are the automated bot pieces? And who is my bot counterpart that's going to be working with me on this? That's the area there that they're grappling with. And then at the third level, it's the human level. It's the very individual human level. And I want to talk about our schooling systems here. I believe our schooling systems are failing the people who are emerging into the workforce today, in that they're not preparing them to navigate significant, recurring, ongoing change. They're not preparing them to move and function in an agile way. And that is why you're seeing the mental distress that you are today at work. That's why we're seeing the burnout. That's why we're seeing the non-ability for people to cope with what work is today and the chaos that it is today.
I think, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I'll pause there because that was a lot that I sent over the fence.
I think the last point is, I think, when I was thinking on the last point, I think it was almost making me feel cry about this. I think my wife and we have this huge debate about the relevance of school system, and I think it's right in the alley of what you're suggesting, right? Because how school system is preparing us to be relevant. I think we're not living in a mechanical age. We're not living in the industrial age anymore, right? So the school system is designed that way. I think so. Right now, I think one thing I really like what you were saying, that we just have to be task oriented rather than sort of this job oriented or sort of this work oriented. And the school system and the graduate system and all that, how we were being educated is training us to be just confident individuals, right? So what really are they adding to the value, and why would a business pay for their premium? In many ways is where they are, like I had this huge fight with the local university here, where I was saying, hey, you train these guys for 4 years and then 2 years for this advanced degree, and I end up buying them for premium, but then I have to train them, and I can actually take a school kid, and probably extract 95% of the value that I need to. So where does you guys come into picture, where these guys are living their entire life in school in student debts for what? That's a different discussion. So I'm sorry about.
Yeah, we'll park that one, but at least we're on the same.
But I think you're hitting right on the nail on those things. So one thing that I really admire talking to people like you. I'm a tech company trying to explore in the HR space. You are a tech company. So basically, that's a very weird qualification to have. Like, so technology, so you are much happier in the technology side of the world. People understand the pace, but the human side of where the technology is making the most impact, I think that we're living in this new age of reality that every company like ours and sort of this grappling through. And when you look at the HR space, when you look at the technology in HR space, it's primarily fitted with basically the trust that these HR folks have built with large vendors and large corporate partners on and basically duct taping them into this new and emerging and I think what I captured from your conversation is it's evolving. You have to it requires new mentality and new age of thinking. But startups in that space takes a lot of time to build trust because there are real people involved, real lives are involved. So what has been some of your challenges, if you're open to sharing, on bringing HR on board, in trusting technology companies like yours? Because I think answer lies in the new technology, new way to rethink about this problem. Because you cannot just, I think it's Jeff Holt said that if you ask people, they just want faster horse. So you cannot just, okay, my answer is just now produce more.
Mm.
That same juicer mentality. So what's your take?
So, Vishal, this is a very, very good question that you've asked. Yes, how I'm seeing it and thinking about it. So I definitely don't have definitive answers. As you say, this is something that's evolving and changing every single day. Yes, how I see it as it stands at present is HR pre-COVID, and our business is actually an example of this. We made a very deliberate board signed off decision to not target HR buyers pre-COVID. Okay, we actually drew that line. We made that stance. We are not an HR tech company. And the reason for that was because HR has not been given the permission to be strategic. It has been seen and perceived and positioned inside companies as a back office administrative function. Okay. And if you think about the key things that make up an HR role, payroll, it's performance management, learning and development, career planning, you know what I mean? There's these very like clear buckets. There's about 9 buckets that make up the HR function. COVID comes along. And all of a sudden, nobody at the boardroom table at the C level, not even the COO, knows what to do with this because it's no longer just a technology issue, just an operational issue, just a finance issue. It is a completely enmeshed, intertwined human technology issue that we're dealing with. And so what happens? The board and the shareholders turn to the chief people officer because it's 80% a human problem and say, solve this for us. And so you now have some really, really smart strategic HR people that have been frustrated as hell for their entire careers because they've wanted to be strategic, but they haven't been able to. And you've got a set of HR generalists who have actually just been very comfortable in their administrative functions. And they're literally having to completely reinvent the profession. So if I could wave a magic wand, I would literally go and create a big university for all HR professionals around the world. And I would essentially re-educate them and I would make their degree a 3-fold degree. I would make it a major in technology, a major in human behavior, and a major in design to create employee experiences. And I think ultimately that's what we're grappling with. We're grappling with a group of people who haven't been unleashed to be strategic, but it's being demanded of them right now. They haven't been trained to be what they need to be. And so they're grappling and they're having to go and get all of these different skills. And we're seeing that. So post-pandemic, we've actually now moved away from our previous target market and we are targeting chief people officers and chief human resource officers. You've been through a very similar transition yourself in your own company. And the reason for it is because they now actually have the opportunity. They've been given the green light by their organizations to do what they should actually have been doing all along.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Now I think let's venture into the trend side of the world. I think so.
Okay.
So I think we were talking before this conversation around what a fascinating time we are living now, right? So I think you talk about cloud boom, you talk about .com boom, we have seen disk drive boom, we have seen car boom.
Mhm.
So we have lived through this era of disruption, where this billion-dollar technologies are being created and industry is being created and things are being disrupted. And I think what I really like about, so you call it a chaos theory, and I have a different take on that. So I think we call it so whenever the disruption happening, it happens in the S curve, and S curve
Yeah.
basically a tectonic shift happen, and then there's a micro trend, macro trend. A lot of things are emerging and shaking and creating that S curve. So disk drive, now cloud, and all those AI. But this time we are different. This time the S curves are happening almost anywhere, are everywhere. So HR systems are getting S curve disrupted. Cloud is getting S curve disrupted. AI, encryption, open source communities are getting disrupted. And when such a shaky ground exists, it actually creates a lot of shaky situation for business who are relying primarily on these services for understanding the significance of their business, right? So we are seeing that, and if you're a technologist coming into this world, you pretty much respect that how much risk these guys or these businesses are taking in trusting these some of these technologies when they are clearly like maybe 20 or 30-year old technologies that are really being challenged with the evolution, and basically how they have to really find either do a totally scary leap, which is again not recommended as a business, or just not look at that and say, okay, I'll
Mm.
probably duck and close my eyes and nothing is happening mentality. And they're basically no clear situation for you. So what has been your um, what has been your observation um, when it comes to how the technology shift is happening and how organizations are responding to it?
To it. Vishal, I'm pausing because it's very hard to talk broadly about how organizations are responding to it. I'm going to choose to answer your question by talking specifically about how large companies are responding to it. And when I say large companies, I'm talking about 10,000 plus employee companies. And the way they're responding to it is essentially a data play. They're looking at where they are right now, and where they find themselves is they have all of these disparate systems. So they've either got, Oracle in place, or an SAP coupled with a Workday or something like that, as their major ERP systems that are holding things together. And then they're either a Salesforce play or an Adobe play on the sales and marketing side. And then, there's all of the different, like what I would call administrative systems, like buckled around that. You know what I mean? But essentially, those are the two big major players. And then naturally, overarching all of that, it's, companies are either Google plays in terms of their working tools, or they're Microsoft houses. And they're looking at this whole ecosystem of tools, and they're saying, who and what we are as a company is essentially lying inside these tools. Everything, our know how, our actual operations, our digital footprint is lying inside of these things. And we don't understand it because we're not looking at it, because all of these systems are siloed. And so, what you see these very large organizations doing is they're getting really serious about building data lakes, and they're getting really serious about building AI and machine learning models on top of those data lakes. I think what I'm starting to see, I don't think this, I actually know this for a fact. I can see this because I'm involved in these conversations with these companies, and I know a lot of other, you're an example of it. You're involved in these conversations with these companies. Is that the problem with creating a data lake is that you're essentially creating a sewage farm. Like, when you do that initial dump of data out of all of your company systems into that data lake, it's trash. It's absolute trash. And there's a significant amount of work that has to be done around cleaning, data work today, because we're in this nascent phase of data intelligence, is essentially janitorial work.
Mm.
And there's a significant amount of data cleaning that has to happen before you can actually go and make sense of the data. And I think that's why companies are experiencing a lot of frustration right now, because they're wanting to get access to the real answers. But this phase that we're in of this data cleaning that has to happen in order to have meaningful information at the other side is taking longer than we all want it to take, and the tools are not really sophisticated around that cleaning, which I think is where we're going to really see the next layer, like big disruption coming in, is in that play there. And I think once we get through this phase of our evolution of where we become more sophisticated about data cleaning, and we actually can get our data to a place where it will be easier to correlate, it will be easier to make sense of relationships that exist between data, we're going to see another big evolution, like a big jump forward, where companies are like, okay, we can actually access the data now. It's telling us X, Y, or Z, and therefore we need to do A, B, and C. But that next jump in evolution that we need to prepare ourselves for is that it's not pretty. The answers that the data gives companies is not pretty. It's when you actually truly suck all of that stuff out of these systems and truly look at your enterprise, it's like opening a wardrobe of skeletons, because things like pay disparity and the lack of diversity inside organizations, the really messy operations, that happen where finance isn't truly as connected to sales as we believe it is. These very real realities of big organizations are actually starting to become very obvious right now as people are starting to look at their data. And those are scary problems that need to be solved, because when you open Pandora's box, when you open that wardrobe and look at those skeletons, you can't ignore them. You can't just like shut the cupboard again and say, I'm not going to look at it. It's like you actually have to look at it. And so to summarize, we're going through this data cleaning evolution. And then we're going to have to address some really serious issues that have surfaced, like cleaning out the wound. And then we're going to get to a place where we're like, okay, we're like really ready as companies to now move into this new future and to really start accelerating. But Vishal, I actually want to throw the question back at you. I'm sorry. I know this isn't my podcast. I know this is your podcast, but are you seeing something similar? Because this is an area that you play in.
So no, I think so. What resonates with me is, I think, what you just said moments back about creating a university for HR, right? So basically, um, and I speak that a lot with leaders, that one of the biggest problem in the data and the humanity world is we have either dreamers dream or analysts analyze. We never have analyzed who could dream, or a dreamer who could analyze, right? So there is no bridge. So if you look at even the HR landscape today, and if you look at, say, their talent analytics team, right? So they're a bunch of radical weirdos put together with the advanced degrees, creating this fascinating model, but they don't know how to communicate. Right? They don't know how to
Yeah.
tell it to the leadership what that really means, and they want leadership to be equally educated to be able to respond to those guys, right? So I think one of the thing that I was about to ask you is, um, basically, what is your role as an, because I struggle that with that concept a lot as an organization. I think you, when you talk about creating universities, right? So you feel the need to educate HR because you understand or empathize with their situation where they have a
Mm.
lot of power. They should be doing a lot more, but because they're not equipped, they are now stunted to act in many of these
Mm.
situations. We see a lot, right? So we, like, whose responsibility is it to educate, right? So when you're dealing with many of your prospects or clients or engagements, in many situations we are that talent analytics belt who is
Mm.
just slammed. Okay, give me this radical insight, I'll probably do something. And then, then because it's too radical, that since there's no story attached to it, sure, you can analyze that there's a 70% chance that something will come out good at it, but there is no story. Like, you cannot take that report and create it into a meaningful product that
Mm.
comes out of it. And and then when you talk to all the big banks, we are in having conversation with large um, industry hubs. They all are struggling with that concept of what does it really mean. Like you
Mm,
made a very
mm,
interesting point about data lake. We have
mm.
this massive slump, and we are throwing models at it. We get amazing insights, but no story that goes with it. Like there's no business
Exactly.
case. Mm.
We're not answering the so what, you know. So what if you don't have your D and E and I numbers correct? You know what I mean?
Right.
So what if you have a pay gap? You know, it's and this is where, to your point, I like the fact that you connected the education of the re-education of HR with this challenge that we're facing. Is that HR has this ginormous task in front of them where they are essentially the bridge between these are the business objectives that we want to achieve as a company in revenue numbers, but these are the problems that we're trying to solve for our customers. This is the reality of our organization. So, out of the slew of interesting data that we've surfaced, we need to focus on this one and this one and this one, because these three challenges, if we solve these, we're going to be better on this side in
Mm.
terms of solving. And I don't believe HR is doing that.
Mm.
I don't see HR doing that today. You know, and I think you raised an interesting question. Whose responsibility is it? It ultimately lands on the CEOs and the boards. The CEO needs to go to the board and say, this is an area of major investment that we need to make as a company. And this is how we should go about it. Because unless it comes from the board and the CEO level, it's not ever going to happen.
Right. No, I think and the funny side is, so when you talk to these like many of these businesses, you see the problem, you see sort of the writing on the wall that um if sort of the trust and if where they are heading to probably is not the right location. It's basically they are struggling, and
Mm,
there is, and you rightly said, there is no sort of buy-in from the leadership on
mm,
this random thoughts. And you as a business would not, because you're anyways not in their trusting zone where they can say, okay, maybe I need this rant. Because, and in fact, I was talking to one of the people officer of a big insurance reinsurance company, and he was talking to me about, Vishal, our biggest battle is the battle with ourselves, right? So he said that basically my 90% headache is to not, my brain says not to trust you, or my heart says not to trust you, but my brain says you are the only guy who is not tainted with what I'm seeing, right? So you are just coming up with this, you are that fresh orange that coming to my table. So now do I really need to indulge, and how I need to indulge? And whatever my heart is saying is that culture that comes with it, which is trained and tuned to not listen to you, and it's trained
mm,
and tuned to listen to maybe an old school mindset, which is costing me through the roof. I'm getting obsolete every day.
mm.
But then it's
Yeah.
just that at one point I just take an adventurous trip with folks like you, and my world changes. And unless those things happen, and that is the constant story with the leadership in many of the organizations. And the fun part is, the organization that needs most help are the most tight-lipped, right? So,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that makes it all the more hard, because you really empathize with them. You said, okay, you can help them, but then the culture is so protective, or they are not being trained and equipped to make those decisions, that it just get pretty interesting.
Mm. I think coming back to that question that you asked me earlier, Vishal, about how we're winning that trust with HR. I think where I'm seeing that we as an organization are achieving that and actually being able to be allowed into that inner circle of HR is we're not trying to pretend to have the answers. Because let's be honest, we don't, and none of us
Hmm.
have the
Hmm.
answers, right? You know, and this is something that I really respect about our current chief revenue officer, Seth, is like I see this. This is something that he does in every single meeting where we're meeting with a customer. Is he's like, we don't have the answers, but we're committed to being the partner who's going to help figure it out. And I think that's key in the environment that we're moving in, is that we're not in a phase of humanity where we actually have answers. We need to realize that we're in problem phase. We're in investigation phase. So if you go back to basic principles of how you solve problems, it's we're right at the beginning of exploration.
Interesting. So, from your vantage point, when you are dealing with these businesses, so what are some of the ideal, whether you call it clients or sort of leaders that you think, so what is the mindset that you think that the companies or the leaders leading organizations should have to navigate through this future work? Like, what's the, from your vantage point, what's the ideal mindset that if I'm listening to this conversation and I am sort of I'm not sure whether I am that individual or not, what would you say, that what would it take for a leader to say, okay, I'll navigate through this probably safely?
Is one single characteristic, and that is it's somebody who genuinely cares about their people's well-being. That and I want us to pause there, and I want us to, this is a hard look in the mirror moment, is, do you care because you just want to get business outcomes, or do you genuinely care about the human? You know what I mean? Are you a leader who is willing to face the fact that the current workforce doesn't know how to navigate the present day reality? And are you willing to be the leader that's going to stand out there in front like a lone wolf and do the hard work of exploring this issue and figuring out how to solve it best? Like that, it's a very particular type of leader. It's a very particular type of person. And not all people are like that. Not all leaders are like that. Um, I will be the first person to hold up my hand and say that if you compare myself and my co-founder, she's definitely more the caring one. And that's why we make a good team, is because I can be the one that's focused on the business goals, and she comes in behind me and she's got that absolute heart for people. She genuinely wants to do something good for our employee base. And so that's for me is the single defining characteristic.
I think so. I was thinking of a very interesting story. Care is a very loaded word, by the way. It's a pretty
Yes.
fascinating word. So
Yes.
I was talking to one of the large cap, basically financial services company. So I was talking to one of their chief HR officer, and I was talking to them about this idea of care, like what does care means. So he was, at one point he was touting to me about one of the tool that he built, which helps him understand how much someone is being productive at their desk, right?
Okay.
So it's a pretty interesting conversation. So he said, okay, this is what we I can figure out if you're not typing or if you're typing, whatever. And I said, okay, go on, because I want to understand how it attached to the care part. So I said, okay, tell me. So he said, and we care that you are so much happy about your work that you are enjoying most of your time producing things, whatever, right? Producing the outcomes, being sort of. So it become pretty comical on the fact that how much some folks takes care, like. And I was telling him, they can pretty much justify killing someone, saying that, okay, I care about him because I'm taking him away from his miseries, whatever, right? So his point. So I said, that's fascinating how you interestingly take such a beautiful goal and made a mess. So it went pretty south pretty quickly. But then I think after a year or two, so he was let go from the organization. He said, Vishal, I see the point. So it was a pretty interesting. I totally agree with you. I think care
Mm.
is um and having a people leader who doesn't care, or who basically care about the profits more than the people. Actually, it's in a weird way impact the profit in a very interesting direction.
In a very, yeah. And Vishal, I want to come back to a point that you've made there. If you're willing to let me meander down that rabbit hole for a little bit, there is, it's important what you said, that care is, it's a double-edged sword. It's because people have such different definitions of care, and I think if I was to look at the biggest challenge that Gen Zs are going to face coming into the workforce, is they're going to have to make significant mind shifts about what the real definition of care really is. Care is not telling you that you're amazing over and over. Care is not telling you good job when it wasn't actually a good job. Care is not about making you feel good. Care is about being willing to be real about what's really happening. Care is about being honest about what's happening. Care is about having the hard conversations around, you're weak in these areas, you're strong in these areas. What are we going to do to make these weak areas better and stronger? How are we going to amplify the strong areas? There's like, care and kindness are not feel good things. They're actually some of the hardest things to do when done right, and I think that it is important that we pause on this point, because I think HR people and business leaders in general should actually define how they care, because it can very easily lead to a lot of misconception in a company. Is if you're putting a message out there in terms of, we care, employee comes into the company and into the team saying, okay, I'm going to be cared for, yeah, but their definition of care and your definition of care is completely different. I think it's important for organizations to define how they care and what that looks like on a day-to-day basis.
So on that, so a random question. So do
Yes.
you should your technology care?
I love that question. I love that question. Let me ask you a question in return. Are you talking specifically about our product that we've built, Pattyrn, or do you want me to answer more generally about technology in general? Should
Go at it.
technology?
I don't know. I don't care. I think it's just yeah.
I want to answer and say our technology, Pattyrn, no, because the vision of our product is that it tells the truth. So if you want to define care as truth telling, then yes, our technology absolutely cares. But our technology doesn't aim to sugarcoat anything or to make anything nice. It's just like, this is your digital assembly line. This is what it looks like right now. This is how your people are working. You know what I mean? Like that's, but I think in general, HR tools and HR technologies should care, because they're there to serve humans. You know what I mean? And so again, it comes back to the definition of, well, how do they care? It's all about the definition of that care. Like an example that we can use, like a metaphor that we can draw here, is like medical care. Okay. Surgery is care. Rehab is also care. Both of those forms are care. But the one is putting a knife to you and cutting you, and the other one is stretching very, very, very stiff, sore, scar tissue laden muscles and tendons and cartilage back into shape. Both of those things hurt like hell, but they care.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? So I think if we were to take that metaphor and run with it, HR technologies need to decide, are we surgeons? Are we physical therapists? Are we post-op surgery care? And what is our definition of care?
I think well said. And Thank you. So now let's and fascinating conversation, and really enjoyed this. So now let's get to slightly lighter part where we can sort of,
Okay.
so we call it rapid fire. So
Yes.
how this works is I will usher something, and you just tell me the first thought that comes to your mind.
I'm looking forward to this, Michelle.
Awesome. So should start?
Yes, let's go.
Awesome. So future of work.
I'm laughing. Trees.
Do you want to explain a bit more?
I do. I do want to, if you'll let me know. I'm doing a lot of reading. So I'm extremely fascinated by trees. I have been since I was a kid. I was an only child. I grew up climbing trees. My parents couldn't get me out of them. I swung in the monkey vines in them. I'm obsessed with trees and I have been since I was little. But I've actually been doing a lot of research around them recently around how they communicate and how they function as a collective whole. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from them.
I think so. This thing reminds me of this book. I think Secret Life of Trees or something.
Yes.
So
Yes.
fascinating book. I love it. I think, and in fact, now you're saying this, all the HR leaders should read it. I think I
Yes.
should they should make a point, because I totally hear what. Yes, I agree with you. This is like we are trees in
Yes.
many ways. Makes sense.
Yes. Agreed. Okay, back to rapid firing. Sorry, I didn't mean
Fascinating,
to
but
distract
I
us.
awesome. I think that's the best answer on future of work I've heard so far. Technology,
Humans.
leadership,
Care.
remote work,
Do it.
equity,
Not everything is equitable. Accept it.
diversity.
It's not what you think it is.
Do you want to elaborate more?
Um, so here's the reality. I live and am part of a very diverse family. I'm African by nature, but I'm not Black African. I'm married to a Lebanese man. I have a stepdaughter whose mom is from Pakistan and her dad is from Iran. So, like, talk about a hodgepodge of a family, okay? Um, we're white skinned. So we wouldn't be put into any D&I metric or quota system. You know what I mean? And yet we bring a lot of diversity. And we were actually having this conversation as a family just a few days ago is the DE and I metrics and frameworks that people are putting into place right now are very limiting. And I think it's actually going to bounce back and hurt us
Hmm.
because if you go and you look at like the limited frameworks that people are using right now, a Swedish family arrives here
Hmm.
as white as anything, you know what I mean? But not white as we describe the culture. You know what I mean? I'm using very provocative terms right now.
Hmm.
We can't put them into the space because they don't tick the diversity box, and yet they would actually be perfectly diverse and actually make the environment amazing. That's what I mean. It's not what you think it is.
I think could not agree with you more. I think this is absolutely, as a technologist. I think so. We have this joke that if you want to learn diversity, ask an AI to figure it out. But I think one thing that because we have so much of variables in us, like even my surrounding, my kids, my wife, my dad gives, like they all give me different, my town that I'm living in. So there are
Hmm.
so many things. I'm as you rightly pointed out, if I'm say Caucasian living in uh, a black town, or immigrant town, what would you call it, right? So there's so many things that have already influenced me, but now you sort of box me out in a different way because of broad general boxes.
Hmm.
I agree. I think it's at some point AI should take care of these things, because then you can have sort of I think you rightly said numbers, right? So technology should not care. right? It should tell you
Exactly.
the it should tell you the
Technology
truth.
should not care. Yeah. And it shouldn't be limited to race and it shouldn't be limited to skin color. There's so many more factors that make up diversity. It's everything from the food we eat to the cultures that we choose to celebrate and make part of our lives, to the spiritual practices that we choose to make part of our life, to the fashion that we choose to make part of our lives. You know what? There's so many variables. And I think I like what you said there because I've never considered that is like let AI make that decision is because AI has the ability to look at all those variables.
Well, it's weird. So slightly tangent because I think this is really
Yes.
really important here. So we have this AI, we have this AI tool, and when we're dealing with HR, one of our recruiting offerings. So somebody says, "Hey, we love diversity candidates, whatever, right?" So we ask
Mm.
HR to click candidates, and now AI is seeing it. So we very quickly realize that every HR they have or recruiter they have a very particular taste of candidate that
Yes.
they're kicking in. So we said okay, then although you don't want you want to be diverse, but the way your culture is getting people in, it's not supporting the diversity thing. So what we did, so we changed the algorithm to say okay, throw 20% random people in their search results, right? Just see what maybe that throw them off, right, slightly. And we are seeing far better results. We are seeing that, and when we call diverse, so we're not calling like ethnic diversity. We're calling primarily skill diversity or
Yes. Yeah.
basically geoloco diversity and all that. And we realize that the AI is basically the recruiters are having fun because now they're not guilty. They feel they're giving everyone a chance, because after a
Yes.
while even they realize they're clicking a particular, if you're an international you're clicking all the internationals. So it was
Yes.
weird all across, I think. So giving it to AI and saying okay, just you figure it out,
You
and we
figure it
keep
out. Yeah.
we keep pivoting the notes, gave slightly better results than what humans
I
are.
love it.
So it's
I
it's
absolutely love it. Yeah. May AI do our recruiting for us in the future.
oh my goodness, yeah. So hopefully so far AI is failing. So far I think the track
Yeah.
record is not very in favor, but yes, I
Yeah.
think
It's not
that's
very in favor, but it's doing some good right
it's
now.
yeah it's actually because I think it's not. So one of the things that we say that all of us have this very sophisticated computer that we're living with, right? And it took ages for us to program this, and
Mm.
now we are giving some of our core capabilities to this AI. It's always like very interesting. I hope that we sort of go with caution as a technologist.
Yes.
I'm thinking, and I should. But I think you're rightly pointing out this. We need a progressive thinking on the HR front. So
On
that's.
that. Yeah.
Anyways, long tangent. I think this is the most weirdest rapid fire I've done, but fun. Uh,
Good.
legislature.
The right to work.
That's deep. Jobs of future.
Bot companions.
Future of learning.
Multifaceted degrees.
Things that keep you up at night.
Nothing keeps me up at night.
Oh
I
my
sleep.
god, you're blessed. Really?
Really. I sleep. And I can sleep anywhere.
It's pretty cool. So thank you for playing that. It was so much fun. So now let's spend a few minutes on your personal journey. Okay.
Okay.
So we ask all of our guests to talk about some of the qualities that have really helped them be what they are, and have them become what they've become. What are some of those qualities that have really helped you shape what you are today?
I'm going to talk about a quality that people find easy to live with, and I'm going to talk about a quality that drives people absolutely insane. So I think, and people tell me this as well, Vishal, I'm just a big kid. I'm, 36-year-old, but I function in many ways. I approach life as if I'm still 5. I just have like a childlike curiosity and an ability to play, like actual outdoor physical play. Like my nephews can still get me to climb a tree with them. You know what I mean? That's the type of stuff. And I think that curiosity is what keeps me asking questions and keeps me looking at things from different angles. And then just sheer stubbornness. Like if I set my mind to something, I'm going to get it done. Like I'm going to get it done. And come hell or high water, I'm going to get it done.
That's a scary thing.
And yeah, it drives people around me absolutely nuts. And I get it done.
Super. I think that's awesome. So we ask all of our guests to share some of their favorite reads, some of the books that have inspired them, or some of the books that they're reading now.
So, Michelle, the first thing I think I need to admit is that I read anywhere between about 25 to 30 books at the same time.
Oh my God.
Yes, the type of reader that I am is I've never ever been able to move to a tablet reader or any form of electronic reader because I always have a pencil or a pen in my hand. I'm constantly having arguments with the author in the margins and I'm like underlining things and I'm making my own notes and everything. So when I've read a book, you can see that somebody has been very present inside the book. And because of that, because of how deeply I engage with the material, I tend to leave it for a while, ponder it, and come back. And I actually find that by reading multiple books, I'm able to cross-synthesize information. But what I will share is two books that I'm busy reading at the moment. The one I'm reading for the first time, it's called The Nature Fix. A fascinating book where a woman, a journalist, has basically decided to go and follow all of the researchers who are currently researching how nature impacts work and our ability to be productive, functioning humans. And there's no hypothesis in the book or anything like that. She's literally following these researchers and sharing what they're discovering and what they're hypothesizing. So wide open. And then the other one that I'm reading, I'm actually reading it for the 7th time, is The Hard Things About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz.
Yeah.
I think that book is still going to fall apart in my hands. Leadership is hard. It's really hard. Getting people to buy into a future state that isn't easy, that doesn't feel good, but that's worthwhile is hard. And sometimes I just need some Ben so that I can remember that there are business leaders out there who have dealt with the hard things in far larger scales than I have.
So I think so. I have this weird fascination. So whenever I go to say library, say Barnes and Noble or wherever, and I find hard things, I just pick it up and put it on the horror section. So that's where it should have been from day one. It's not meant. It's just he had some weird thoughts, and now we are having it too. So it's absolutely. I think it's brutal truth. And many times if you want to understand at one point I was telling my wife, if you want to understand what's going on, sometimes read this book. So something or the other is going on at all the time. So
exactly, yeah.
But I think I loved the Nature Fix. I think that's another and slight tangent. So
yes,
AI, right? So so whenever my engineers and we are looking for any solution or any insight of how would we should do, the best answers are 99.9% times are in nature. If we find a role model that has done it, and many of the successful algorithm where even we are, our biggest point is panic. Our biggest panic is bias. We don't want the AI to have bias. So every time when we are looking for ideas, I think because nature makes things more human. And I think when I asked you about should technology care, I think that's the only part where I think technology should care, because people are relying a lot more on technology. And if technology is not, many times it's doing our homework in many ways. As I said, if I would let them be what they want to see, they would all be biased towards the candidate they are hiring. They would not see diversity. So that now the AI said, okay, no, I cannot take that as an answer. I should indulge because I
Mm-hmm.
really want them to get better candidates and
Mm.
not better looking candidates. So
Yes.
that's where it was pretty weird. But I think
Mm.
I totally admire your the nature fix and that fascination towards learning this from technology as a technologist. That is, I
Yes.
think that's most of us. I think many of us, we owe it to the society
Yeah.
to understand and see how we can translate our geeky side to the human side. I think that's why you,
Do that.
and I
Yeah.
admire you for that for sure.
And I think, to your point there, Vishal, I think I like how you phrased it there. As technologists, we owe it to humanity. And I think we owe humanity a few things. The first thing is we owe humanity the humility to say that as technologists, we are very devolved.
Hmm.
Like if you look at nature and the billions of years of evolution that it's been through versus the minuscule amount of years that technology as we know it today has been through. I think that's the first point is
Hmm.
that humility to recognize the devolved state that we are in. And then the second thing is to have again the humility to actually go and learn from the very evolved side of the scale and say how can we do that. And I love that you guys do that, with your AI, is go and look for those models in nature.
Thank
Yeah.
you. So, last but not the least, so if you
Yes.
want something that our listeners and viewers to take away from this conversation, what would that be? Like, what would be your parting thought?
If you are a chief people officer, a VP in HR, an HR generalist in HR administration, consider going and reskilling yourself. You need to recognize that the problems that you're facing are complex and need a different set of skills. If you're a business leader grappling with your people and your systems, know that there's partners out there who can work with you on these things, and we would love to work with you. And I think to the very last point that we've just discussed, get out of the box. It doesn't matter what type of leader you are or what type of listener you are. I think I don't think, I know that we're living in an age of problems that can't be solved the way we solved problems before. We need to go somewhere else.
Thank you. I think with that clear, thank you so much for spending your time and being generous with it. And as a fellow um, technologist in building a startup in HR space, I have nothing but admiration for your effort, because I think many times people don't realize how much it takes, how much basically you are investing yourself to educate the market, to being sort of that arbiter that helps understand where the industry is heading to, and that on the other side you are being humble and polite to the point where you are not perceived as threatening to, and from that point of view I really admire, and I think from what I have heard, uh, wish you nothing but phenomenal success in your journey. You're always welcome back on the podcast to talk about how things are moving, and maybe we should talk about trees at some point. I think it's another fascinating conversation that we should indulge at some point.
I would love to have a conversation with you. Vishal, the same respect for you. Thank you for having me here today. Thank you for the rapid fire questions and the longer questions and the funny questions. And, just thank you for being you. You're a good human. We've got a lot to learn from you. And I'm looking forward to hosting you on our podcast soon.
Thank you for your time.
Good stuff. Thanks, Vishal.